Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and in this video I want to talk about a concept I call sharpen the saw or sharpen the axe. Now, there's kind of this famously attributed quote to Abe Lincoln which says, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Now there's also, I remember growing up, I was in Scouts as a kid, so I'm an Eagle Scout, and I remember our Scoutmaster told us this story, which is, there's an old man and there's a young man out in the woods, and they're competing to see who can chop down a tree the fastest. So they go out there, they've got their tools, and first thing the guy sees, so the young man just starts getting to work, right? Just just wearing himself out, sweating. He's obviously muscular. He's making all sorts of progress. He's like, man, I'm gonna smoke this old guy, right? The old guy's just over there, he's like, can't really tell us what he's doing, but he's just sitting down, hunched over this kind of stump and just working on something. But he's not even chopping the tree, right? So he's like, I'm gonna absolutely demolish this guy. I'm gonna get there so much faster. And he's keeps going, making progress. A couple hours later, he's not taking that many breaks. He sees that the old man started, chopping down the tree, and then he's taking a break again. He's sitting down on the stump, right? And this just continues. And then at some point in the afternoon, the old man kind of rounds a corner, and then the tree falls, right? And this guy's still working. And as it turns out, what the old man was doing was sharpening the axe, right? So the young man was kind of thinking, oh, I've got this muscle, I've got this brawn, wasn't thinking strategically. The old man, he'd been there, done that. He also didn't have as much strength as he had before. So he said, all right, the way that I'm gonna win is make sure that the tool that I'm using is cutting as efficiently as possible, right? So that's how he won in the end. Now, the way this applies to you, and really the overarching concept that we're talking about here, is sharpening the saw when it comes to your mind and when it comes to learning. So really it's adopting this mentality of being a lifelong learner. Now, what this looks like kind of a little bit more practically in self-publishing school is we try to do daily training. So I'm a firm believer of training. Obviously, I've got kind of some other principle videos on how to choose books, kind of a college dropout's approach to learning, things like that. But this is like kind of where the rubber meets the road. Now, in self-publishing school, my target for our employees is about 5% of their time is spent on training. Now, there's 2 ways that you can do this. Number 1, you can chip away 30 minutes per day. So you kind of chop the tree a little bit, then sharpen the axe, chop the tree a little bit, sharpen the axe. Or you can batch it and go to a conference for a couple days or things like that. But really kind of, if you look over the course of a year, I really want every employee to be at about 30 minutes a day, which equates to actually 2.5 hours a week, which is 5% of their time if you're doing about a 45-hour work week. Then that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like to sharpen the saw on a continuous basis. Now, this is super important that you don't neglect this. And so to do this, we also do about 2 to 5% of our budget is allocated towards spending money on training, right? So we've got 2 to maybe 5% of our budget for the entire company is investing in training, and obviously this kind of changes as the company grows because that amount kind of becomes a lot more. But then also making sure that we're doing that time. Now, one very practical way that we did this, and I'm a firm believer in don't break the chain or don't break the streak. I might record another video on that. But it's this concept that basically, hey, can you build a habit and get a streak going? Right? For 10, 20, 30, 40 days in a row, what does that look like? So I've done this for things like push-ups, like writing a thank you card, for meditating, all these things. But I like to do this for training as well. So the way that we kind of gamified this is we had this tracker, who has the longest streak of training days. So they spent 30 minutes per day for X number of days in a row. And this is kind of how we got kind of like down into the weeds of actually having practical training and doing it consistently over a period of time. Now, the kind of last thing I'll mention when it comes to the sharpen the saw principle is that if you're a knowledge worker, so if you work online, so I run an online business, right? So I'm a knowledge worker. I kind of joke with my friends and family. I'm a keyboard jockey, right? Kind of grew up in a place where, you only do physical labor, very blue collar, and now I just stand or sit at my desk and I'm on my computer all day. Now, your computer is your axe, right? And I'm blown away at how many people will just ignore this. They've got this really crappy computer from like 10, 15 years ago. It barely runs. It's super slow. It causes all kinds of problems. They have to shut it down, restart it. It takes 15 minutes to boot up. That would be like a carpenter that comes in to do work and has a dull saw or a dull axe. That would be glaringly obvious if you're a carpenter, but for some reason, when you're a knowledge worker, people ignore that. So that's kind of a concept within the concept is if you're a knowledge worker, if you work on your computer, upgrade your computer. It'll be some of the best money that you spent. And even if you have to take that money from elsewhere, right? So maybe you've got that money allocated or you need a budget or you need to pay it off. Like the time yield that's going to benefit over the years that you use that computer, how many hours, days of your life are you going to get back by having a sharp axe? Okay, so that's the concept, sharpen the saw. It's kind of a cool little catchphrase that you can use and that we use kind of amongst the team is like, oh, I'm sharpening the saw, right? Or we need to sharpen the saw on this thing, which just is kind of a reminder that, hey, we need to invest some time in being more strategic. Let's work smarter, not harder here. So instead of swinging a dull axe, let's sharpen the axe, sharpen our skill sets so that we can be more effective in our role. So the question I'd ask you is, where do you need to sharpen the axe? Right? How much time do you consistently spend sharpening the axe? Or are you one of those people, kind of like I've been in the past, who just relies on pure effort to get things done? I'd love to hear from you in the comments on those questions, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See ya.